Hello, welcome back, everybody. I hope you had your little bite and took your little break. I had a chocolate, and that's giving me a lot of energy, which is exactly needed when you interact with someone like who's our next guest. That is Naren Sham, founder and CEO of Omeo. So, hello, Naren.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Perfect.
Perfect. Thank you so much for joining us today. And the focus of this 30-minute session is startup stories, and probably nobody better than you to start with. And Naren's story is actually one of the most inspiring stories, not only for Indian founders, but also for Berlin founders. So Naren born in Bangalore and studied in Harvard and moved to Berlin in 2012. And when in 2010 he was backpacking in Europe, he realized a gap in the ticketing system, the transport ticketing system, and that's how the idea of Omeo came. And today, Omeo is a Berlin based unicorn and also one of the few companies that raised capital, a huge round of capital during the pandemic. So we are so excited to have you, Naren, here and learn some lessons from you for entrepreneurship. So thank you very much for joining us, first of all.
Thanks a lot for having me. It's an absolute pleasure. When you guys invited me, I immediately signed up. So very, very happy to be here.
Same here. So, okay, since we have 15 minutes, so let's dive deep into it. So, as regards to your entrepreneurial journey, Naren, you've had many successes, and I think in some of your previous talks, you've also spoken about the struggles of entrepreneurship. But if you have to look back and mention that what have been the three defining moments or benchmarks in your entrepreneurial journey, what would you list?
Yeah, I think when you focus on entrepreneurship, I think most people, as you know, focus on the headlines around the success stories. But I want to say equally important are the hundreds of thousands of failures that happen until somebody gets there, and all the people around me that have contributed to kind of where we are, and I don't think we're remotely as successful as where we'd like to be as well in terms of where we sit currently. But personally, I think the three kind of decision points or life-changing points in my entrepreneurial journey. The first one was founding the company. I think it's a very hard step for a lot of people. If you're an aspiring entrepreneur, or you want to be an entrepreneur, etc., I would say try it. There's just no other way other than just getting your hands dirty on something you aspire to be. And that was a very, very big step for me. It was an even harder step because I moved to Germany to found it. So that means I didn't both speak the language nor know a single person. So it was, and this is back in 2013, 12, 13. So at least the ecosystem now helps foreigners a lot more than back then. So I think that's the first. The second one is when we decided to rebrand, probably from, we used to be called Go Euro, some of you may know the name, to Omeo, to make it a global business. I think this was a major decision because I knew a rebrand is not easy. It was going to be expensive. In the short term, we would sacrifice a lot, customers, revenue, true impact, meaningful impact on the business in order to make a long-term change towards where we want to go. And the third, for me personally, the biggest impact has been probably an elephant in the room is just COVID. One day to the next, we had about 98% of our revenues drop in a week. In a matter of weeks, we lost 98% of revenue. We had roughly 100 million plus euro of negative cash flow implications because of cancellations. There were days where I sat up at night and I wasn't sure it will make it. We didn't have the cash to pay customers back on cancellations. We needed to strengthen the balance sheet. We needed to move the organization into Kurzarbeit. So that kind of journey through the last 18 months has profoundly changed me as a leader and as a CEO. And I think these are three probably life-changing moments in my personal entrepreneurial journey.
Wow, I'm glad you spoke about these because some of them we would definitely like to, know more about. So the second one you mentioned was being a foreign founder, and at that time there was not so much ecosystem support. So what were really your hurdles, at that time, and probably in a line or two, how did you overcome them as a foreign founder here in Germany?
Yeah, I think maybe if it's okay, what I'll focus on is kind of what are the hurdles I see today,
Mm-hmm.
because the ecosystem has changed a lot, and how to maybe look forward from here on. Stuff that wasn't there before that is there today. First of all, the market is great. Market for me is entrepreneurship, hundreds of thousands of founders from everywhere, phenomenal businesses. The amount of capital raised in 2021 is already bigger in year to date. 2021 is already bigger than 2020, which was already the best year ever, etc. So the market, the ecosystem of founders is there. So if no better time to start a company than now. Second is there's capital. I mentioned it already on the amount of capital raised, but the sources of capital, there's been exits, there's been companies going public, there's US funds, there's more venture capital than ever. But seed rounds are going in the range of, back then when I was raising capital, seed rounds would be at best 2 million, 3 million euro pre. Today, seed rounds are, I've even heard of 50, 60 million seed rounds pre. So that means there's such an over, there's so much capital that you will be able to create value. And then the last one is talent. There's such great talent. I mean, best of engineers, best of product people, commercial, marketing. I mean, all aspects of talent. So when you compare Europe and Germany to like the best startup ecosystems like the US or China, you've got all the ingredients here. Now let me tell you what's not yet here. What's not here is risk taking. We are still very careful. We want to be careful in our investments. We want to be careful in our decision making. We want to be careful in our bets rather than making them bolder. Number one, what's not yet here is an acceptance to failure. You have to fail, like I would say 90 times before you're successful, once, 99 times maybe. But you have to make peace with that. Otherwise, you're never we shouldn't, as an ecosystem, we should totally celebrate every person who failed is on their way to something bigger next time. So I think that's the second. And the third one is kind of the vision. In order, European companies, German companies can become big global players. And for me, it's not necessarily driven only by valuation or whether you're a unicorn or not, but just the number of customers you touch, the number of people you impact. These are the metrics you should measure yourself on. I think these three elements are still, it's there, but it's still not at the scale that makes, creating the next big successful corporations of tomorrow.
Yeah. I mean, so basically, it's all about resilience. You fail and then you stand up again, and you fail and you stand up again. And also, going back to the third benchmark you spoke about, which you said that it really changed you as a person, or, the kind of crisis that happened because of COVID in terms of situations changing every day. So, how did, okay, the first part is how did it really change you as a person? As you mentioned, and second is that how did you deal with it as an entrepreneur? What was your mantra that we will get through this, we will survive this?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, Diksha. If I think through, like, the the kind of how I felt, and I've shared this internally and also some externally. You're driving a fast car, you're growing. Just to let you know, we were growing roughly 90 to 100% the last 3 years, right? So when you're driving that fast on a fast lane, and then COVID hit, it's like you've had to pull a handbrake at that speed, and you spin completely out of control. So the first thing you want to do is bring the car to a safe parking lot, make sure everything's good before you can get back on the road. So that's the impact it's had on me in terms of understanding the impact on the business, the impact on what survival means, the impact on decision making, how fast you need to make decisions, the pace at which you operate. All of these things have changed quite drastically in terms of my thought process. I've always told myself, and the part that was the hardest is, I think it's a quote from Winston Churchill: "When you're running through hell, just keep running. So don't stop and look around." So I took this quote as gospel over the last 18 months. But the problem was, we sit today and we're looking ahead. Our business is back stronger than ever before, etc. But it wasn't so clear. It wasn't so clear a year ago. It wasn't so clear how long it will take. So that's the hardship, that you wake up at 3 o'clock saying, you still don't have a path forward. So generally, as an entrepreneur, you have a vision. It's clear where you're driving. Operationally, you may not be as efficient, but at least you're clear where you're driving to. When a crisis hits, it's and hopefully nobody ever has to face this kind of lesson in their entrepreneurial journey. It becomes unclear, and a lot of it is unclear for a very, very long period of time. And I think at that time, you need to anchor yourself around some core principles on what you want to get out. I'm going to protect my people. I'm going to protect innovation inside the company. I'm going to maintain a strong balance sheet so that we can come out on top. So a few principles like this, and then you spend maximum amount of time being positive, driving towards that, way outside, navigating an organization, investors, shareholders, everything you can think of through that journey, because everybody's looking towards you to see where you're going, and making sure you communicate that very, very clearly in terms of what that vision is during this path. And at some point, if you are persistent and you're able to get through this with resilience, then at some point you will see the light. And when you see that light is when you kind of lean in and start driving the organization. Because once you get back on that kind of track again, then from there on, you're back to how you operate. You take the lessons you've learned. You're a better person. You're a better leader, etc. So I think the hardest part is until you see that light, and those are the darkest moments for entrepreneurship. Every entrepreneur will face that in their own way, but you have to find your way through that through some core principles that you can anchor yourself to.
Wow, these are also life lessons and not just entrepreneurship lessons, I would say. And I would just add one thing here is that I think with Omio specifically, there is also a lot of team support you need during this time. And I think there was a LinkedIn post that completely went viral, of one of your employees, that how Omio supported him during the times of pandemic, and beautifully written. Probably I will share it with the network later. But yes, just adding on that it's this resilience, leadership, etc., plus also the support of the team. And oh my God, time is passing fast, but this question definitely we should take up is that internationalization. So at what stage, you spoke about vision and you spoke about thinking big, at what stage should entrepreneurs focus on internationalization? Should they go for local market first and then think of going global, or is it something that's formula from day one?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. I don't think there's a black and white answer to that. It really depends on the product and the industry you're in. So, for example, I'll give you two kind of opposite ends of the spectrum, and there's a big scale in between. When you think of travel, like hotel bookings, most customers are global customers in a local market. Because of the pandemic, we're traveling more locally. but most customers are non-local, so they come from international markets, say Airbnb, for example, Booking.com. So your demand is more global, and your supply is local. And the more markets you're in, the network effects start to come into play. So that forces you to go global day one, because your networks and what drives the underlying economics of the business is inherently more global. If you take like last mile delivery or quick commerce, it's very hyper local. You want to win one market. So I don't think there's a one size fit all answer towards that. Deep tech SaaS businesses are vertical driven, depending on where the underlying buyers are, in that vertical, basically. So I think you want to first understand where your product fits in the larger ecosystem and what drives the economics of that product. And until you fully satisfy the economics in that one, either vertical, geography, whatever, don't expand beyond. You need to have that core engine working, basically. And as long as that's working, whether the next step is geographic expansion, etc. So sometimes you may have to try 2-3 geographies to see where it works, because certain markets, you need to evolve your business model. So you may need to experiment, but you shouldn't be going too broad unless you have the ability to prove the product market fit in a certain, call it space, whether it's an industry, a vertical, a geography, a country, or even a neighborhood, if necessary. If you're doing like a social media for neighborhood platforms, you need it to work in that neighborhood first before you. So I think it's a very specific to your company and your business model.
Yeah, and probably a question that founders ask themselves a lot. So thank you for breaking it down into different segments. And on that note, Naren, a message from you for Indian and German founders that are here at Indo-German Startup Week today.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think it's a message for any founder anywhere in the world, not just Indians or Germans, etc. I think entrepreneurship overall is the best ride of anyone's journey if you are lucky enough to be able to experience it. Don't go into it with vanity metrics like I want to be a founder, or there's no glory in being a founder. It's basically hardships, sleepless nights, a lot of stress more than necessary, and many times the return is not so straightforward, and it's definitely not always clear when you start it. So if you are thinking of entrepreneurship, I would encourage you to do it every single time, but do it because you're passionate about building something, a problem you want to solve, a customer base you want to make life better off, and not for the sake of being a founder. And once you understand what is that problem you want to solve, commit to it fully, because the ride is going to be wild. It's definitely unclear. And so when you look back at the end of that journey, you want to have as few regrets as possible, which means you need to be fully there to say, I'm going to do this, whatever happens and however long it takes. And some companies exit in 12 months, 18 months, some go 20 years and still keep building. And that won't be clear when you start. So commit fully, go the whole way, and build as big as possible towards your customer, and the rest of the things will come in place.
Wow. Thank you, Naren, for this energizing session. And I wish you all the more success in Omio for your future. And thanks again for joining us.
Thanks, Diksha, and best of luck for the event. And hopefully you guys have a fun 3 days. Thanks for having me.
Yes, thank you. And bye. And this brings us to our next speaker for the Startup Story session. That is Tom Ziegert from Berlin Space Technologies. He's the Director of Business Development at Berlin Space Technologies. Hello, Tom.
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. Thank you very much for joining us. And I think we are a few minutes late, but we will cover that up with
I can just speak a lot faster, so don't worry.
Yeah, no, I think Amrita will forgive me for a 5 minutes overlap. So I think your business model particularly is so interesting, and I think before I dive into entrepreneurial lessons or questions, we would love to know that how are you working in the sort of new space domain at Berlin Space Technologies, and what is the link of your business model to India? And I think it best comes when you explain it rather than I explain it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, actually, maybe it's first important to look what new space is, right? So traditionally, the space industry or the space ecosystem, or what we call as old space now, is a very governmental driven thing. So you have companies and you have space agencies, but in essence, it's always money that comes from the government and goes to companies, and they may or may not be owned by the government itself. So typically very large companies and limited to very few nations. And so New Space tries to do that a little bit more commercial, trying to look who could be the customers that would be paying for the services that would then allow to pay for the satellites and so on. And so Berlin Space Technology is a company that wants to do that or is doing that, basically focusing on the end user. And the reason and our connection to India is essentially that so in 2014, 15, we realized that that satellites will be produced in larger numbers, and we were looking for a place to build a factory. And there we identified India as a very good place to do that, having a good, well-educated workforce, having a rocket, and having a fastly developing market. So that's why we're there.
So you have a joint venture with Azista Industries in India.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, that's correct. So we have a factory there to build satellites.
okay. So could you tell a bit about how this collaboration actually happened and worked out? Because that's pretty much the premise of our flagship day, that how Indian
Yes.
and German startups, or rather say entities, are working together.
Yeah, so basically, this is selecting a partner to do work with an industry is often like a marriage, and like a marriage, there are various ways to find your partners, and in our case, it was via mutual friends.
Okay.
Some people that we knew that knew those guys, and so we were around and looking in India for potential partners because we found India as a strategic good location to do that. And some friends of ours knew the Azista guys and that they were looking to go into space, and they felt it's a good match, and so they made the introduction. So of course we talked to a great number of people, but we felt that with our friends from Azista, that's the best fit.
And so who actually are your customers and how do you acquire them? So I hope this question falls in the right place, but
yeah, that is a very good question. So of course, the short answer is anybody that needs satellites as a customer, potential customer of ours. But to be honest, until very recently, our main customers were basically new and emerging space nations. For example, Singapore and Indonesia and Egypt, who want to build their own space capabilities. They work with companies like us to build up these capabilities. And so that was maybe until 3-4 years ago. And from there, we have a rising need from basically commercial companies who want to use our satellites to deliver products and services, mostly in the domain of Earth observation, but also in the domain of communication to end users or governments and so on. What I find very interesting is that recently, even the established space nations with their agencies look far more to small and agile companies like ours, Sometimes they see we can provide results faster. Sometimes they see we have very good prices. And yeah, though these are the things, the customer base that we currently have. And how we find them, well, that's another story, right? You try to reach out, you try to figure out where they are and what they want, and then you start talking to them.
And are they difficult to convince, or I mean, because you're sort of changing the commercial space in your area, so it's like a sort of new movement. So are there any
Yeah.
challenges there? And if you could give tips that even other entrepreneurs could use, that if when they face challenges towards acquiring customers, what is the mentality that usually you should have?
Well, so the what Nareen mentioned is there's probably 99 failures for any success that you do, and so resilience is of course key. But for us, the key point was basically seeing is believing. The customers will not really buy from you if they cannot at least see the capabilities that you're having, or otherwise you have to be like super convincing. And so if you have nothing, if you have no product, nothing to show for, it's extremely difficult to make a sell. And with a market that has extremely high entry barriers like the space market, for us really selling the first satellite, that was the biggest challenge. And we're very grateful to the customers in Singapore who gave us the opportunity to do that, because without that first customer, it's very difficult to penetrate a market which has such high entry barriers as space.
Wow. And is your business model cost intensive? How important is funding for you? And some of your experiences in that domain could also be something that we could learn from.
Well, we are probably a bit of a strange company, right? So we're a bootstrapped satellite company, and so that means that maybe for the first 10 year of our 11-year existence, or maybe a first 9 year only, we did not collaborate and take in any external investment. And also even right now, the company is still owned 100% by the 3 founders. And so we only made a joint venture to build the factory with an Indian partner. And there we have external investment by our Indian partner. For the very, very longest time, we did not even have a credit line from a bank. So we have operated our company maybe 7 out of the 11 years without a credit from a bank. And that is because the banks simply didn't believe in commercial space. It was still too early before the whole space boom was going on. And the banks did not believe in it. The venture capitalists did not believe in it. And so we had really no other opportunity to do basically to do bootstring it, so to sell something small, invest everything into it, and of course that takes a lot of time to do it, and probably you can do these things faster. But the big advantage of that is that the company is still owned by those who have founded it in the full entirety, and that is also a pleasant thing to have.
I am personally a big advocate of bootstrapping, and also, there are many examples of bootstrapped billionaires also from India built unicorns by being bootstrapped. So that's very much possible and brave of all entrepreneurs who go through that route. And one question, just on a concluding note for you, Tom, is that how has the pandemic been for you? I mean, Naren spoke about it and he said that it changed him as a person and it was highs and lows, but what about you personally? Or was your sector agnostic in a way to the pandemic?
Let's say the first thing. So out of the 100 German small and medium enterprises in the domain of space, I think 96 of them reported problems, life-threatening problems during the pandemic. We were in a very fortunate position. Our customers, on the other hand, right, we were in a very fortunate position. So we were one of the 4 companies that that did not have so much problems. And the reason for that is again, thanks to our unique structure. So we have a lot of customers who will do these things hell or high water. And then what you should not forget is that our Indian partner itself, so Azista is part of the hetero healthcare group of India. And so that's a big pharmaceutical company, and there's probably very few branches of industry that work, well in a pandemic, but pharmaceutical certainly is. And so we never had any faltering in the support of our partners, and so we were always in a very lucky position. But yeah, I mean, you can see stuff crumbling left and right, and you wonder what's going on. But yeah, we were fortunate.
So comes back to resilience again then.
Lucky and good choices beforehand.
Yes.
That is the key of being prepared. Is prepared for the unknown is what helps you to survive that.
So yeah, thank you, Tom. And probably one line for your as a message to Indian and German startup founders here. One line.
Two very important things that I have learned. So first of all, and that comes as a requirement for the resilience, is you have to absolutely believe into yourself, because on long stretches of your journey, nobody else will. And then it's extremely important, that's the second thing, extremely important to listen to your customers. This is, if they tell you, if the customer tell you, this what you have is not the right thing, then you have to either find different customers or find a product that helps them. Yeah, that's the two things that I would want to say.
Thank you so much. And I think we also had a poll during Startup Stories, but if we did not, probably we should launch it now. And then I could announce the results of both the sessions together. So thank you very much for joining us, Tom. It was great to learn about your about new space and also about your startup. And also, I think specifically that you're working with India and your tips that you shared in that area today. So I wish you all the success for your startup and see you again at another event of GINSEP very soon.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me and have a nice day. Bye.
Thank you.